Okay, another question from a student.
You've mentioned how Congress and the presidency, the executive branch, have been interacting, but can you comment a little bit on how Congress and the judicial branch have been interacting? What Supreme Court decisions have done to affect the decision-making process in Congress?
Well, there's almost no interaction between Congress and the judicial branch. And unfortunately, the body politic as a whole doesn't really pay much attention to the judicial branch until there's a controversial issue decided, and then there's reverting back to the basic philosophy and dominated by whatever comments come from the hard left or the hard right. I think the typical member of Congress doesn't pay a heck of a lot of attention to those issues under the theory that, well, you can't really impact them much and they're going to decide based upon the law, and the law is beyond my area of responsibility, they would say. I guess that's the best answer I can give you. But you know there are going to be some high-profile cases. You know when that sensitive issue involving a word, abortion, you know when the court is going to decide on an issue involving reproductive rights. I can almost go right down the list of all members of Congress and tell you what their reaction is going to be depending upon the decision of the court. I mean, and people get so set, like an abortion is a classic example. People get so set, they come early, and I've had this actually happen. I have voted, I happen to be a pro-choice Republican. I mean, I feel deeply about women's right to make the decisions on women's reproductive rights. But I've actually watched, I've put my card in and voted yes to guarantee a choice, or no to prevent anti-choice efforts from going forward. And I've had colleagues stand beside me, you know, you're probably right, but. And the but usually is, I'm getting so much heat from the protesters back home. I don't really feel strongly one way or another. It's sort of equally divided. I can make a good case on one hand, on the other hand, either way you want to argue it. So the most vocal people back home, it's like the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I am convinced in my mind and heart that there are some of my colleagues who vote one way on that issue and don't really deeply believe that's the right way. They have their doubts, but because of the pressure from back home, the mail, the protest, and all that stuff, that's the way they vote.
That raises another question in my mind, again having to do with your fierce defense of science and scientific integrity. You have butted heads also with religious conservatives on a couple of science issues. Certainly the religious conservatives have opposed stem cell research. They have opposed the teaching of evolution in the schools. You brought up...
Well, they want intelligent design taught.
Right. You brought up the abortion issue as well. Do you think that in the last decade or so, religious conservatives, cultural conservatives, have had undue influence on scientific policy in this country?
I think they've had more undue influence on media coverage because they're so loud, so vocal, so active. But in terms of the decision-making, I would point out that the movement is going in the opposite direction from the course they would chart, because more and more research on embryonic stem cells, which is the real issue. People say, well, I'm for adult stem cell research. Well, who's against that? I mean, but embryonic stem cell, that offers the greatest promise, and that involves the most sensitivity in terms of discussions. And you're having people who are highly regarded in the right to life movement, like Senator Orrin Hatch, very vocal in support of stem cell research. And so, but you know, when you deal with an issue like that, Linda, it's tough back home. People don't follow it as closely as we have to in Washington, involved in the debate and everything else. And I would venture to say if you quizzed a lot of people, they don't really know the difference between embryonic stem cell research or adult stem cell research. But they know there's some controversy going, so they tend to think all stem cell research is bad. And so it's part of our job. One of the things I do, I'll have town meetings and people will say, I'll get someone who is more supportive of the right to life approach and therefore anti-stem cell research in their minds, say to me, how can you be for stem cell research? That's killing an innocent life. And you try to get into a technical explanation and everybody's lost, and I'm not adequate in terms of giving a real technical explanation. So I usually say something like this: do you realize that we have a choice? We either take these embryonic stem cells that are excess to the needs for in vitro fertilization and either flush them down a toilet or send them to the lab where scientists can do research that might someday cure or find a partial cure for Alzheimer's or juvenile diabetes or Parkinson's. And when I put it in those terms, they sort of shake their heads. I didn't know these were going to be destroyed anyway. So if you say discarded, that's not strong enough. Flush them down the toilet. You know, you flush something down a toilet, it's totally distasteful, not going to serve anybody any good. And so.
Well, but to just follow up on that question, I promise I'll let you guys ask your questions, but there has certainly been the criticism made of the last several years within the government, and you mentioned one of these scientists earlier yourself. We'll talk a little bit about this, that the government and the administration has been interfering with or trying to push scientific outcomes and findings in a certain political direction. You defended, for example, a scientist, a climate change scientist, who said that he was being muzzled by NASA, his agency, because they didn't...
Dr. Jim Hansen, a highly respected scientist. And, but we looked into that, you know. I mean, I know the government has some very accomplished, distinguished scientists on the payroll, paid by the U.S. taxpayers in various agencies. And there have been suggestions that this administration is trying to prevent them from speaking out if they're speaking out in a way that is contrary to the direction the administration wants to take us. So I've been deeply involved in it. But I find no fingerprints that would lead me the trail to the White House. Here's what happened in this one instance, in the case of the NASA scientist who is very outspoken and saying global warming is for real. Guess what? I happen to agree with him, and so does the overwhelming scientific consensus. But then there were charges that he was being muzzled. He was being denied access. NPR wanted to interview him, and the way it was reported, he was denied that opportunity to go on for an NPR interview. We ended up doing a thorough analysis and investigation of that. Turned out some rogue young guy, 24 years old, who was in the public affairs office, was the culprit. And I am convinced this young guy, he stars in his eyes, you know, and he's a true believer. I think he got up every morning and instead of pledging to the flag, pledged to the Republican Party and all that stuff. I think he thought he was doing the right thing because the administration generally has not been as open about embracing the notion that global climate change is for real. I'm trying to choose my words carefully because even the President of the United States has said it's for real. And even the President of the United States has said man has contributed to it and we've got to do something about it. The big difference is what to do about it. But so this guy really got involved and tried to muzzle this scientist. But it was the one 24-year-old guy, and ironically, he's later dismissed because it was discovered that he fudged his resume, he lied about his qualifications, et cetera, et cetera. So he's gone, and the problem is no more. But nowhere could I find any indication that the administrator of that agency, Dr. Mike Griffin, or that the President of the United States or any of his operatives were trying to muzzle him. It's just this one 24-year-old believer who thought he was doing good for the cause. It's like one of my first campaigns, some young volunteer kid, high school kid, was out And he came in the office one day and he said, boy, we really did good work today. I said, what'd you do? He said, we pulled down some of the posters of your opponent. I mean, he thought he was helping. And I said, don't you ever do anything like that. But I mean, he's a young kid. So I explained to him, that's not the way to do it. You want to work to support me and not try to support me by tearing down the opposition's posters.